Hey, folks. I'm old, and therefore don't bounce back like I used to. Of course, who does after a night of drinking? Certainly nobody in this office. That's why on the night of the debate, the first thing Emma said when she came into the office, don't forget the Zbiotics. We drank it. And then
Huge help.
the night of drinking was no problem. And this weekend, I actually went out to a function, and I drank Zbiotics beforehand. Sunday morning, up, chipper, getting right to it. Had a lot of stuff to do. Zbiotics is a pre-alcohol probiotic drink. It's the world's first genetically engineered probiotic, invented by PhD scientists, and it helps you feel better the morning after drinking. Super simple. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in your gut. And apparently it's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Well, Zbiotics produces an enzyme, and what it does, it's simple. It breaks down this byproduct. All you got to do, make Zbiotics your first drink of the evening, tiny little bottle like this. Drink responsibly, and you're going to feel your best tomorrow. Honestly, this weekend, yesterday morning, I got up almost with the crack of dawn and cleaned the apartment, getting prepared. Saul was coming back over, and it didn't even occur to me, but like, I had a couple of drinks last night, or 3. Meanwhile, summer is in full swing. Time to pack your calendar with fun activities. Doesn't matter what you're doing. Pre-alcohol can help maximize your time. Go to zbiotics.com/majority. Get 15% off your first order when you use the code majority at checkout. You can also sign up for a subscription using my code so you can stay prepared no matter the time or occasion. Zbiotics backed with a 100% money-back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember, head to zbiotics.com/majority. Use the code majority at checkout for 15% off. I want to thank you, Zbiotics, for sponsoring this episode and making it possible for all of us to come into work the day after the debate.
Absolutely.
All right. Now time for the show.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
And I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Monday, September 16th, 2024. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Dr. Melvin Rogers, professor of political science and associate director of the Center for Philosophy, Politics, and Economics at Brown University, author of The Darkened Light of Faith, Race, Democracy, and Freedom in African American Political Thought. Also on the program today, apparent would-be Trump assassin in custody. No shots fired by the assassin, as far as we know. Meanwhile, J.D. Vance continues to shoot himself in the foot over his racist attacks on immigrants. And that same Springfield, Ohio, is in lockdown once again amid bomb threats as a function of the top 2 candidates on the Republican ticket claiming that Haitians are ruining everything there. ABC News poll, Harris won the debate, maintains a slight lead in national polls. This as Harris meets with Teamsters in an endorsement interview. It's day 4, Boeing workers on strike, tens of thousands of them. out of Israel. The Israeli military admits its bombing likely killed 3 more hostages that have been recovered. Meanwhile, Yemen rebels hit Israel with a ballistic missile. Boar's Head shuts down its Virginia plant tied to listeria deaths. This in the wake of Republican praise over its deregulation. Speaking of lawlessness, New York City Mayor Eric Adams is on very thin ice as his chief legal counsel quit in the middle of Saturday night. And lastly, Donald Trump and Laura Loomer sitting in a tree, and what it means for the Georgia and North Carolina presidential vote. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us. It is the beginning of the week.
Fun day Monday.
Fun day Monday, says Emma Vigland. That's
Hello.
as accurate as anything. The fun is, we'll see, but it's definitely Monday.
Yes.
We got a lot to talk about. Of course, we're now, I'm making this up, 50 days out from the election, a little bit less. 49? I feel like this is something that we would know around here, but
we should have a ticker on the bottom, like CNN does for every.
Minus 7. It's got to be like 55 days.
Yeah,
It's 50 today, actually.
50 days. There you go.
Yeah, nice round number.
50 days from the election. Harris continues to be sort of maybe got a tiny bump in the polls. I suspect that you will not see, I mean, the debate, she clearly won the debate, at least in terms of how normal people and what the polls say and whatnot. And it is tough to assess if that's going to help her come 50 days from now. But the big question, going into that debate, we were saying 28% of those polled wanted to know more about Harris. Now, presumably what they want to know is, does she have all the qualities that would lead one to determine that she had won a debate against Donald Trump, right? I mean, like, to win a debate means more or less that. Like, does she appear to be presidential? Does she appear to have a good temperament? Whatnot. I mean,
one way to look presidential is stand on stage next to a guy who's talking about people eating dogs and cats.
Yes. And for Donald Trump, it worked last time when he was standing on stage with a guy who looked like he was, trying to portray someone who had no idea where they were. But that doesn't necessarily mean like a lot of people are going to flip their support overnight. But it does mean that the chances of them come election day or whenever they fill out their ballot and have been wavering and are not sure, that there's a slightly better chance that they're going to tick off. They're going to end up voting for Harris. But who knows? There are other things that we'll talk about today that I think are going to implicate the election. And we will get to that in a bit. However, it is becoming almost sort of, I guess, forgive me, but weird on how like J.D. Vance is being sent out there by Donald Trump day after day and basically being told, pull the pin on a grenade and then blow yourself up by it. And
was that assassination attempt, was that on Sunday? Because he was golfing during that time period.
Yeah. And meanwhile, he's golfing.
Yep.
And J.D. Vance is on every Sunday talk show. And basically, the only thing that's coming out of these Sunday talk shows, because, people don't watch them like they used to anymore, it really just becomes like, are we going to get one or two clips? And there's really basically 2 or 3 clips that have come off of all of these shows. And they're all, how come you keep doing this and attacking these Haitian immigrants where everyone in the community, it seems like, is saying, don't do this anymore. It's like, it's literally harming the community. They're on day 3 or 4 now for a lockdown. Like the local college have been shut down because of bomb threats.
Yep.
I mean, they can't, the social services places are all locked down because of bomb threats. It's been ridiculous.
The Republican mayor of Springfield came out and denounced these claims. The Republican governor of Ohio, DeWine, said, quote, absolutely not when asked if he's seen evidence of Haitian migrants eating pets. But no, the Republican presidential pick and VP pick still persists.
Look, even TMZ's getting into the swing of things. We put this up. Remember the picture? They said, okay, well, maybe you know that the woman caught on video who had just killed her cat and was supposedly the cat eater was in Columbus, clearly either having some type of emotional break or drug induced break, and was an American citizen. I mean, there doesn't seem to be any indication she's even of Haitian descent, but she's certainly an American citizen, been here for over 5 years. And then apparently the picture that was going around of a black person carrying 2 geese turns out to be someone working for the Ohio Division of Wildlife who was collecting these in Canton, I guess it was. Oh, in Columbus
Also
as
in
well.
This was in Columbus, yeah.
Yeah.
After they had been hit by a car.
So doing his explicit job.
Well, doing his explicit job, but basically doing the same work that it takes you to almost become like almost the vice presidential nominee of the Republican Party.
Yeah, exactly.
It certainly helped RFK Jr. But okay, so now all this has been exposed as like a complete fabrication. We presented to you who the architect of this was, a literal neo-Nazi. Nazi? I mean, really, do we want to
Blood
split
pride.
Yeah,
But like an avowed Nazi
yes,
in every
exactly.
definition.
I'm not being hyperbolic. I
Right.
mean, this is like their stated ideology. So, what does J.D. Vance do? For whatever reason, these guys really, really want to motivate people who hate immigrants, regardless of what it means to their, like, how they come across to other people. It's strange.
Once and for all, you again started this in part by saying that, at which Donald Trump repeated on the debate stage, that, and he didn't say anything about the policies that you're talking about. He just said Haitians are eating dogs and cats. Can you affirmatively say now that that is a rumor that has no basis with evidence?
Dana, the evidence is the first-hand account of my constituents who are telling me that this happened. And by the way, I've been trying to talk
Pause
about
it
the
for a
problems
second.
in Springfield.
There is no constituents. That's a lie. And really, when the rumor that has no evidence, but that's also, there's another word for that. It's a lie. Like, it's a lie. There's no constituents. Even the woman who first put something on Facebook that was like slightly an allusion to it has said, like, that's not what I meant. And it's really blown up. And I can't believe this.
And Dana Bash pointed it out earlier in the interview. There had been 2 reports of supposedly Haitian migrants taking geese. And then the city looked into it and they found that there was 0 evidence to back those claims.
Telling me that this happened. And by the way, I've been trying to talk about the problems in Springfield for months, and the American media ignored it. There was a congressional hearing just last week of angel moms who lost children because Kamala Harris let criminal migrants into this country who then murdered their children. The American media totally...
There's no accusations that these are criminal migrants. They are legal immigrants. They are legal immigrants. Good.
let criminal migrants into this country who then murder their children. The American media totally ignored this stuff until Donald Trump and I started talking about cat memes. If I have to,
But it wasn't just a meme.
It's not
create
cat memes.
stories so that the American media
All right, go
actually
back. I
pays
want to
attention.
hear what
sorry,
you just
I'm
said. Yeah, yeah.
sorry.
No, well, Dana Bash said something to that effect. It's not just cat
infuriating.
memes, but of course it's not cat memes. It's accusations, and these aren't just
Blood
like
libel.
funny. Yeah, exactly.
Until Donald Trump and I started talking about cat memes. If I have to,
But it
if
wasn't
I have
just a
to
meme,
create stories so that the American media actually pays attention to the suffering of the American people, then that's what I'm going to do, Dana, because you guys are completely letting Kamala Harris coast. You had one interview with her. You talk about
Pause it.
pushing
I
back
just want to be
against
clear what he said. If I have to create stories to get the media to cover how I like what the real question, like what?
To bend it to the narrative that I want, which is that we are being invaded by hordes of scary migrants who are black and they're practicing basically satanic voodoo. That's essentially what he's trying to engender with the evangelical base and the most racist people in this country.
And to be clear, he didn't create the story. He borrowed it from a Nazi.
Kamala Harris coast. You had one interview with her. You talk about pushing back against me, Dana. You didn't push back against the fact that she cast the deciding vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which is why a lot of Americans can't afford food and housing.
You just said
We
that
ought
you're
to be
creating
talking
a
about
story.
public policy.
Sir, you just said that you're creating the story.
What's that, Dana?
You just said that this is a story that you
Yes.
created. So the eating dogs and cats thing is not
We are
accurate.
creating. We are. Dana, it comes from firsthand accounts from my constituents. I say that we're creating a story, meaning we're creating the American media focusing on it. I didn't create 20,000 illegal migrants coming into Springfield.
Pause it.
thanks
He
to Kamala
just
Harris's
did create 20,000 illegal migrants coming into Springfield. First of all, the highest number that anyone has of any repute has suggested have come to Springfield is 12 to 15,000. They are not illegal immigrants. They are legal immigrants. And he knows this. He's mentioned this in the past. He doesn't believe in the temporary protected status of Haitian immigrants. But he knows this. So he's literally just, as he's saying, I didn't create this, he's creating it. Go ahead.
Policies. Her policies did that, but yes, we created the actual focus that allowed the American media to talk about this story and the suffering caused by Kamala Harris's policies.
Do you condemn the Proud Boys, even if it's just 12, even if it's just one marching in Springfield?
Dana, I condemn all white supremacists. I'm obviously not. I'm married to a non-white person. I don't like these people, but I think that we have to keep our focus not on 12 marchers going down the street, but on the fact that thousands of residents have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's policy. I find this very unusual, Dana.
You find it unusual because there's thousands that don't. There's no thousands that are saying that. And incidentally, it's not just 12 Proud Boys who are marching, although let's put a clip of this. It's also, like we say, the entire city is in lockdown because of bomb threats.
There they are.
J.D. Vance's buddies.
And literal KKK flyers being handed out, according to the reporter from Mother Jones.
All right. Well, we'll talk more about that.
Can I
as the
just
show
say,
progresses.
really briefly, this is what they want. They want the bomb threats because they're punishing the city for not backing up their racist claim. That's what these neo-Nazis are doing.
And in some respects, the bomb threats are doing the exact same thing that J.D. Vance says is okay. You can make up any story as long as it gets you media attention. That's what he's doing, right? He's saying it's okay if I created the story that Haitians are stealing cats and dogs and eating them if people pay attention to the fact that, well, I guess immigrants exist. I don't know. couple of words from our sponsors, and then we're going to be talking to Dr. Melvin Rogers. He's a professor of political science and associate director at the Center for Philosophy, Politics, and Economics at Brown University, author of The Darkened Light of Faith, Race, Democracy, and Freedom in African American Political Thought. First, sponsor today. You want to learn a new language? Well, the best way, of course, would be to uproot your entire life and move to the country in which this language is spoken and immerse yourself there. However, a lot of us can't do that. But there's still a way to learn the language the next best way, and that's with Babbel. And I will say, personally, necesito más siempre para practicar, pero no lo consigo por culpa de mi hijo.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, it's my kid's fault. You could speak like a whole new you with Babbel, science-backed language learning app that gets you talking. You don't have to waste hundreds of dollars on private tutors. That's the old school way. Babbel has 10-minute lessons. They are quick and they are handcrafted by over 200 language experts. They will get you ready talking your new language in 3 weeks. Talking is the key to really knowing any language. It's designed by real people for having real conversations, and Babbel gets you talking. They got tips and tools. They're grounded in the real life stuff that you want to learn. Everything is focused around conversation. There have been studies from Yale, Michigan State University, and beyond that continue to prove that Babbel works. One study found that using Babbel for 15 hours is equivalent to a full semester at college, and I can guarantee you, with a kid in college, it is much cheaper. Over 16 million subscriptions sold. Babbel's 14 award-winning language courses are backed by a 20-day money-back guarantee, so no pressure. Buy Babbel, will travel. Here's a special limited time deal for our listeners right now. Get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, only for our listeners at babbel.com/majority. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/majority, spelled BABBEL.com/majority. Rules and restrictions may apply. And also, I just got a new bed.
Oh, wow.
Yep. Got a new sponsor, and the stuff came shipped exactly when they said it would. Got a beautiful, it's like a white oak bed with like a bed frame and a mattress too, all from Article. Article believes in delightful design for every home. And it is exactly sort of like my style. A little bit understated, but very clean, a little bit minimalist, but not like too. Yeah, it's nice. It's beautiful stuff. And thanks to their online only model, they have some very delightful prices. That's the other thing that's right up my alley.
Yeah.
Nothing. I want to get something nice, but I'm not going to break the bank. They have curated assessment of mid-century modern, coastal, industrial, Scandi, which I believe is Scandinavian. That's sort of what and boho designs make furniture shopping simple. Article's team of designers are all about finding the perfect balance between style, quality, and price. They're dedicated to thoughtful craftsmanship that stands the test of time, and it looks good doing so. Article offers fast, affordable shipping across the U.S. and Canada. Plus, they won't leave you waiting around. You pick the delivery time, and they'll send you updates every step of the way. It really was amazing. Article's knowledgeable customer care team is there when you need to make sure your experience is smooth and stress-free. Check out this stuff over at article.com, folks. It's really beautiful stuff. And like I say, the shipping was perfect. Like the exact window. I'm not home all the time, so incredibly helpful. Article's offering you $50 off your first purchase of $100 or more. To claim it, visit article.com/majority. The discount will be automatically applied at checkout. That's Article, ARTICLE.com/majority for $50 off your first purchase of $100 or more. Check it out. All right, going to take a quick break. When we come back, Dr. Melvin Rogers, author of The Darkened Light of Faith, Race, Democracy, and Freedom in African American Political Thought. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigland on the Majority Report. Real pleasure to welcome to the program Dr. Melvin Rogers, professor of political science and associate director of the Center for Philosophy, Politics, and Economics at Brown University, author of The Darkened Light of Faith, Race, Democracy, and Freedom in African American Political Thought. Professor, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me on.
Very rudimentary question. I just want to start here. I'm a big fan of intellectual history. What's the value of it as a discipline? I mean, like where the sort of tracking the genesis of thought and intellectual strains within the context of a movement or of history writ large. Like, what's the value of it to us in general?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think there is a great deal of use in trying to get clear about the ideas that are responsible for structuring the world that we inhabit now. And the best way to do that is to go back in time and try to chart those ideas. Whether it's the ideas that we recoil from and we're trying to avoid, or whether it's the ideas that constantly seem to be a source of hope, that constantly seem to revitalize the present.
Yeah, it's interesting. We were just talking about J.D. Vance's sort of like a tour where he is sort of justifying, I guess at this point, like the spreading of these lies about Haitian immigrants, being legal or illegal, but even more relevant, or I should say undocumented, or even more relevant as to, what they're doing to the community. And it's helpful to know that this is, sort of like the rumor is generated by literal self-identified Nazis, because at one point the idea sort of mutates or at least becomes like a different, I guess I talk about it like goes from a solid to a gas by the time it gets like expressed by maybe a J.D. Vance. But what the essence of it is. And that's what sort of, I guess, brings some light to it. So with that said, you are like, you track Black intellectual, I guess, thought through the early 19th century, maybe around the 1830s through into the 1960s. And the idea being that there is been widely considered two sort of, I guess, dispositions towards America and the American project, as it were, that place Black folk or their perspective, having come as in this country or come from slavery in many instances, most, particularly early on. Will you outline those two sort of like distinct sort of, I guess, flavors of thought, and then sort of place where your book is in terms of what the argument as to this other strand of thought?
Right. So the point of the book is to try to understand more clearly why it is African-American intellectuals and activists from, as you say, from the 1830s through the 1960s, to try to understand why they remain so committed to the United States amid ongoing practices of oppression, domination, exclusion, and the like. And when we go back in time to the 1830s, we see one of the lines of inquiry that I track, to just sort of put it in, I think, in simple terms, is a commitment to the American polity. A sense that the United States can be better than what it is, and a sense that the United States can be better than what it is in its treatment of Black people, precisely because the nation, white Americans, Black Americans are not finished products. We're plastic. We can develop and grow. On the other side of this, I think, sort of against this view, is the idea, you see it very famously in the abolitionist and Black nationalist Martin Delany of the 19th century, an extraordinary figure. But you see in him the idea that, no, the degradation of Black people, the insistence on white supremacy, these are not just simply aberrations of American life. These are at the core of American identity. And therefore, Black people ought to strongly consider picking up and leaving. And you can see this strain in Martin Delany, which is the figure I spend most time on. But if you were to come forward in time, you would see it again in the 1920s with that extraordinary Black nationalist Marcus Garvey. And if you came on up to the 1960s, you can find it in the Nation of Islam. And my book, in attempting to lay out those who were committed to the American polity, it tries to defend a set of ideas that I think are still active in American culture today, and that makes sense of why it is you still have the African Americans committed to transforming American society.
And one of those figures who I guess represents that that philosophy is David Walker. Tell us about him and his, I guess his most defining piece, I guess, is a pamphlet essentially he wrote in 1829.
Yes. So David Walker is born in 1796 in Wilmington, North Carolina. He's free because his line of freedom follows the status of his mother, who was free. As he grows up, he slowly makes his way north and settles in Boston in 1825 and quickly becomes a member of the small but growing African-American community there. David Walker is politicized by what he sees on his journey from the South to the North, and he is interested in striking a blow at the heart of slavery. And so he writes this extraordinary pamphlet, 1829. It travels along the eastern seaboard south. It reaches Georgia and Louisiana. And it is an incendiary text because it's partly a sort of call to arms to African Americans to stand up and answer the call of freedom amid practices of enslavement and domination. And it is also an attempt to sort of shake his white counterparts into understanding that the call to action by Black people is simply and significantly the result of a commitment that they themselves once fought for, a commitment to freedom, right? That which they fought for against the British crown in the 1770s. And in David Walker, you see, in some ways, both of those two elements that I identified earlier. On the one hand, you see a David Walker who is committed to the transformation of the United States, but you also see in that text a side of David Walker that says, look, if white Americans won't transform, then Black Americans must reevaluate their relationship to the polity and what those various options would mean. But David Walker, I insist, is a critical figure, and he's a figure that's then subsequently read. He's read by Martin Delany. Frederick Douglass famously reads him. As you come downstream, W.B. Du Bois reads him. And so in this regard, he is a sort of signature and I think unattended to figure in American and African American political thought.
Speak a little bit about his perspective on Thomas Jefferson, because I took my kids to Monticello last year, and they came back a little more skeptical of Thomas Jefferson, I have to say. Credit to the tour guides there and whatnot, but I think like they were I don't want to say they were jaundiced, but I guess that's the point, right? Like you're riding that knife's edge on some level. Right.
I mean, David Walker, and this is historically both before David Walker and after, African-American intellectuals and activists have always had a very complicated relationship to Jefferson. because despite the fact that the Declaration of Independence is written by a committee, historically and how we sort of think about it in the public imaginary, Jefferson is its author. Jefferson is the one who articulates the sort of foundational values of the United States. This is sort of how we understand it. And Jefferson thus occupies a position, even in the 1830s, in the American imaginary that is unmatched by any other American founder. And Jefferson, in his notes on the state of Virginia of the 1780s, had very incendiary things to say about African Americans and their moral and political capacities. And Walker, by the time he writes the pamphlet in the 1820s, 1829, Walker is very clear that we should not think Jefferson's words will just simply pass quietly into the night. That given Jefferson's status, it is a different level of critique and attack on African Americans. And for just this reason, he says, David Walker says, we must prove his words wrong. And what he means by that is that African Americans must do what they can to lay claim to freedom and perform the very thing that Jefferson is saying that they do not have the capacity to perform, which is to be self-governing agents and to recognize when that self-governance is in danger. The other thing I would say about this sort of Walker going after Jefferson in this pamphlet that is structured according to 4 articles, and in using the language of articles, it should bring to mind the Constitution. And the fact that he goes after Jefferson, and he is very clear that Americans don't seem to understand the implications of their words as written in the Declaration. It suggests, if you keep those two things in mind, the Declaration on the one hand and the Constitution on the other, it suggests that Walker is really trying to displace Jefferson as the founder to which one can look for guidance, and install in his place the pamphlet that Walker is offering you. And if you really believe the words of the Declaration, then you will understand that the claim about the equality of persons applies to all human beings, regardless of their hue.
And what was contemporaneously with him writing that pamphlet, like to what extent were we seeing, particularly in the North, Black, if not self-governance, governance? I mean, like, or at least engagement with the political process as a citizenry. I mean, you know, I think we certainly know in the context of Reconstruction, at least for a brief period of time, we saw a lot of like Black politicians in South Carolina and the Carolinas. I mean, ultimately there was this, blowback, or I guess, but within the context of like the 1830s, pre-war period, what existed that gave Walker that sense of like, this is a model for Black governance?
Right. So I think there's a couple of things to sort of keep in mind when we think about the early American Republic. The idea of politics and organizing was, or what we would call organizing, was a very capacious idea. So there was, of course, the formal structures of government, the recognizable institutions that we identify at the federal and state and city level. But then, of course, there's what we might consider the sort of informal practices of politics in civil society. So between the 1830s and the 1850s, for example, you had a developing African-American community that was producing newspapers, that was producing and developing literary and philanthropic organizations that established a Negro convention organization that could serve as a nexus point for bringing African Americans together to reflect on the great problems of their day, mainly the persistence of slavery and practices of domination. And all of these things essentially performed in an informal way practices of self-governance that they were formally denied in terms of participation in the state and federal government.
And that quality of civic virtue and whatnot, this runs up against. This is when I guess, Delaney would basically. I mean, how much did Delaney sort of eschew this, like, and just sort of say, like, okay, just we need to leave, type of thing, and bring us forward in time as sort of Walker's ideas resonate, but still there's this parallel sense of, like you say, that traverses through time too, of this project is immutable in some way.
Right. So the thing I would say about someone like Martin Delaney is that all of the figures, whether we're talking about David Walker, the abolitionist Mariah Stewart, Frederick Douglass, as we come forward into the 1890s, Ida B. Wells, all of them agreed that racial injustice and practices of domination, those were the problems. And all of them agreed that what was generating that was claims about what race meant. But they disagreed on what the response ought to be and whether or not the United States was sufficiently flexible to become something other than what it was in its treatment of African Americans. As you come forward in time, let's say Ida B. Wells, the extraordinary Black journalist, who is now, where after the Civil War, the new manifestation of white supremacy, let's just call it that, is the lynching of Black people, and Ida B. Wells is going directly at that. Ida B. Wells also sides with David Walker in holding out the prospect of transforming white Americans. And the reason why she holds this out is because she does believe that Americans are attached to a certain kind of vision of themselves on the international scene. They do not want to be understood as both the so-called greatest defenders of freedom and the greatest violators of it, right? And so Ida B. Wells will often speak to a domestic audience, but she was also interested in speaking to an international audience in an attempt to sort of shame white Americans and the American government to a position of moral rectitude as it related to racial justice.
How did that? I guess is a question of how did the intellectuals of this time borrow from, if at all, maybe internationalist perspectives or anti-abolition or abolitionist writers, maybe from Great Britain or other areas of the country, of the world.
Right. So I mean, all of this is part of the. All of this is part of. Let's call it the. Sam, I want to go back to your earlier term. All of this is part of the atmosphere of abolitionism. And whether it's in Britain or whether it is in the United States, all of abolitionists in various forms are sort of insisting on the commitment to freedom and equality. What they're struggling with in various ways are what are the sort of levers we can pull on to help induce in our audience, to help induce in them a desire to transform. And keep in mind, this is a period, and dare I say, unlike our own, this is a period in which ideas of virtue and character still matter. This is a period in which shame still matters. And so in their mind, appealing to the character of their audience and attempting to shame them into the right position, it was reasonable for them to hold out the thought that that could work. Right? Yes, the Civil War, if we go back in time, yes, the Civil War itself, the actual war, is responsible for the transformation of the United States. But the Civil War comes about because of earlier abolitionists engaged in rhetorical and moral appeals to their fellows, preparing the ground for the actual Civil War.
I think, I mean, you know, and we'll talk about this briefly in a moment, but projecting forward, that embarrassment or sense of shame in the international stage, certainly like during the Cold War, that certainly helped, you know, sort of, I guess, like move at least from an institutional level, civil rights forward. But I want to just go back in terms of like Ida B. Wells and the way that she would, you know, she talked about post-Reconstruction, laws had begun to change, at least, you know, to some extent. I mean, certainly there a large sort of like constitutional framework had been developed in Reconstruction. She still talked about unwritten laws that existed relative to Black people in the context, you know, within the United States. But what did Reconstruction and the subsequent like retrenchment of white power, very often violently, and certainly, you know, ranging from like violent retrenchment to sort of malignant neglect, you know, coming from like the federal government and maybe the North broadly speaking of that retrenchment. What did that do to the perspective of people who thought like, oh, this is a ongoing project, and you know we're not perfect yet, but we're trying to get there. When you see like 1 or 2 steps forward, and maybe arguably like 1.5 steps back, what happened, ideologically speaking, or in terms of those ideas?
Right. I mean, one of the things about this, Sam and Emma, that is actually quite significant, and that we ought not to understate, is the ways in which we know that African Americans were pushing for formal legal standing. We know African Americans were demanding that they be treated as equals, and we know that we get the Civil War amendments that sort of establish their standing in political society. But we also know, Sam, as you just laid out, that we subsequently get a retrenchment of white supremacy, which is a sort of elevation of white Americans above non-whites, and it displays itself concretely in the treatment that's on display against African Americans post the Civil War. But these African American intellectuals also never lost track of the fact that what you also want to change as well is the culture that sustains these new laws. And if the laws have been transformed, but the culture itself has not, then ordinary everyday Americans will look for opportunities to violate the law, or look for opportunities to do injustice legally, right? And so part of what these thinkers were always trying to keep in view for us were the 2 levels on which American democratic life functions: the legal institutional level, and then this cultural level. And so what you see during the period Reconstruction and beyond, the period of Jim Crow, what you see is white supremacy still at work in the sort of cultural atmosphere of American life, which is what Ida B. Wells refers to as the invisible laws. The culture that basically authorizes white Americans in believing, regardless of the law, that African Americans can still be dominated, policed, and dare I say, extinguished.
I guess that relationship between like sort of the culture and the statutory progress, I guess, is sort of, I don't know. I have just the vision of like, I had to lift a bureau over the weekend, and like you sort of wedge it back and forth, and one corner goes forward about 6 inches, and then you got to use that corner to go forward the next 6 inches with that. All right. Well, let's talk about, then let's shoot up to Billie Holiday and who you write about in viewing this era of the 1930s or 20s, when we had this sort of like, that was almost like the peak of the retrenchment. We should say, I bring this up all the time, but when we had all this controversy about all these Confederate statues that were going down, this is when most of those were built, somewhere between 1910 and 1925. Also at a time where we had, 10,000 KKK plus maybe at Madison Square Garden. We had almost 6 million card-carrying KKK members at a time where we had 100 million people in the country. The number was probably maybe even higher than that. So this is that era of the 20s and early 30s and maybe the teens is sort of the peak of this retrenchment. And just, I guess, tell us about Strange Fruit.
Right. So if you sort of follow the conversation that we've been having up until this point, we now know a couple of things. We now know that African Americans are trying to sort of persuade their white counterparts to be better than they are in their treatment of Black folks. We now know that some of the ways that they tried to do that had to do with the emotional states, let's call them, of white Americans. Can we shame them into a position of moral rectitude? We also know that the reason why they held that out as a possibility is because they thought that their white counterparts, like human beings generally, are flexible, that we're not in some final way settled. Into Billie Holiday and Strange Fruit. Originally called Bitter Fruit, it was a poem written by Abel Meeropol, a Jewish American. And this was written, from our understanding, based on his encounter with a lynching photo, that is to say, a photo of an actual lynching. And he was so horrified that he wrote the poem called Bitter Fruit. He would subsequently put that to music, offer it to Billie Holiday, and it would become a Strange Fruit. Holiday was performing this song at various locations, clubs, and the like. And Billie Holiday had a specific way of performing this song and having it staged. At Cafe Society, where she used to perform it in New York, as soon as she would enter on the stage and that song would start, all of the service stopped. A spotlight was set upon her, and she would sing the song without interruption. And as she sung the words of the song, Strange Fruit, she would often contort her mouth to sort of mimic for her audience the horror of lynching. The song is about lynching. And part of what she was trying to do in the way that she could do what her skill set as a musician, as an artist, part of what she was trying to do was to perform in the song and on her body what she wanted to elicit, bring out of her audience. We all should cringe and discuss at what lynching represents. So here now we have a figure that literally is telling us that democracy is not merely about institutions, it's not only about culture, but it literally is wrapped up in our bodily comportment toward our fellows. What we cringe at in relation to what is violated in them. And so Billie Holiday performed this song. Her mother reportedly didn't want her to do it, but she said in the way that she could contribute that she thought that this could make the country better.
Before we get to James Baldwin, who's sitting right there above your shoulder. But before we get to him, how does that sort of dynamic of shame work in the absence now of through the 1800s and early 1900s, so this idea of like, we want to prove that we're not just a, podunk colony, that we have some sophistication. And one of the ways that we do that is sort of like to promote freedom. I mean, I'm not saying everybody felt this, but there was that was the sort of the toehold in terms of shaming people. And certainly during the Cold War, a similar dynamic. We need to prove to the third world that we're not as racist as the Soviet Union is claiming. But we're now like in an era, it seems, where it's denial, right? Like it's not, there isn't, I mean, we certainly have some people who are sort of like proudly racist, but the sort of main thrust is denial. Like, we've had a black president, racism is over. Or, I'm talking about, it's coincidence that it's Haitian immigrants, legal immigrants I'm talking about. What I'm really talking about is we need more social services for, residents, even though I don't promote that. Like, there is a denial that goes on. What does that do? What does that leave for the tactic, the strategy of shame? What does that do to that?
Yeah, I mean, Sam, this is a very important question, and it's a very challenging one, because why would I engage in a tactic of shame? Let's use a different emotion. Why would I appeal to you for sympathy? It must be because I think contained within your inventory of values that define who you are the kinds of values that I can hook into that would make you show or incline you to show sympathy for my position and thus be willing to help me, or that would incline you to feel that you've fallen below a level or a set of values that you're committed to, thus inducing in you a sense of shame, because that's what shame is about. To feel shame is to feel that you've fallen below a set of values that you otherwise take yourself to be committed. When your parents say to you, after you've done something, shame on you, and the moment in which you sort of lower your head in shame, it is because you and your parents identify with a set of values that orient you. So that's what's informing the tactic. And yes, on the other side, you do have denial. You do have the performance of that's not really what I was doing or what I was talking about. And when you engage in this tactic, what you're really hoping for is that there are enough people in the room that share the value and that's bearing witness to the denial, and that you can move. But one, right, these figures are, the figures that I talk about in the book, the thinkers I talk about in this book, they're not interested in the most committed racists. That's not who they're talking to. They're talking to Americans that are on the fence, who seem not to fully understand the full gravity of what is going on, attempting to move them to their side and effectively build up a kind of moral majority on the issue. But that doesn't preclude the fact that there will still be the real racists out there. And it doesn't preclude the fact that they will often come back around and try to figure out ways how to move people to their side. And sometimes they will do it by claiming that what they're really after is the protection of services in the community. And it just so happens that it's these people who happen to be Black that are a danger to those services.
Yeah, I mean, the conversation seems, more submerged and in some ways, ironic relative to I'm reacting to a picture of lynchings, as opposed to like the way our tax our tax system is written up actually is maybe not prima facie, but sort of like de facto racist because it's been created by, a white structure. But
and on this point, some would argue for just this reason of what you described, that seems to be telling in the direction of Delaney's argument. Because look, we've moved across time, and although white supremacy in one sense is not as, depending on what time we're talking about, it's not as evident as it was before, it seems to have mutated and figured out ways to mask itself. Even though a great many of us can say, no, I can pull that back and there's this thing there. And Delaney would say, see, the fact that it keeps coming back is indicative of the fact that this might be what America really is.
What did James Baldwin have to say about that?
Well, I mean, James Baldwin was under no illusion that the devaluation of Black people, the elevation of white Americans, he had no illusions that this was part and parcel of American culture. What he denied and rejected was that it exhausts the full meaning of American culture and its politics. And what David Walker says is that, look, we ought not to tell ourselves stories about our inevitable and inescapable progress. These are the things Americans, we like to tell ourselves, that we're always on an upward trajectory. And that in fact, there's no way that we could not be on an upward trajectory. And Baldwin's insistence that it is the belief in that will prompt us over time not to attend to the way in which our past history continues to show itself in the present. Because if you confront it, then you will have to accept the possibility that we are not on an upward trajectory, and it is not fated for us to be on an upward trajectory. And that's a difficult thing for us. And I want to now insert myself here. That's a difficult thing for us as Americans to accept. But Baldwin thinks that the true test of American democracy is our willingness to confront this honestly and to figure out what are the resources and habits we have to cultivate to make us nimble and agile when our history, our past comes back at us.
I mean, I guess that's a tough thing to navigate even from his perspective there, because the other conclusion you can make if you're like, this is, inherent and everlasting is like, what's the point?
So I think the way Baldwin wanted us to think about it is that our past, our collective past, our individual past, particularly when it's traumatic, can't help but leave its trace on us. And sometimes it leaves its trace in a way where we lean into it. We become the darkness that is part of our past. Or sometimes it leaves its trace in the ways in which we're trying to build forward and against that past. But what's interesting about that second move is that there's no way to understand or even to articulate to others why you are building forward and in this particular way without telling the story of your past. That it is there, that it is constitutive of who you are, foundational to who you are, does not mean that it finally controls you. It is in you, but it need not have you. Right? And it was that possibility that Baldwin holds out as a space for Americans to both be mindful of their past without being controlled by it. But if you follow Baldwin, then you're gonna have to reject some other things that are part of, let's call it America's public philosophy, which is we have to accept that even when we in the present are not responsible for that history in the sense of being the cause of it, we're still responsible for what it does to us in the present. And so the question is, are you going to act in response to it, to deal with it, to figure out how to respond to racial injustice, although you're not the actor that brought it into existence? Or are you going to say, I never owned slaves, right? This kind of language in our society. So that means you gotta reject different ways of thinking about responsibility and adopt new ways of thinking about responsibility. Responsibility that you might have for things that you yourself didn't do, but that's still affecting the communities to which you belong and the relationships that you have with your fellow citizens.
Dr. Melvin Rogers, the book is The Darkened Light of Faith, Race, Democracy, and Freedom in African American Political Thought. We'll put a link to that at majority.fm. Really appreciate your time today. Really interesting stuff.
Thanks for having me.
All right, folks. We're going to take a quick break, head into the fun half of the program, wherein we will have fun.
Yes, we will.
We've got a lot to cover. First half of the program, we talk about the intellectual history of almost like a third sort of strain of Black thought relative to how much we are, our destiny is linked to our past in terms of the creation of America. And then in the second half of the program today, we're going to talk about how Laura Loomer and Donald Trump, seem really cozy.
Really cozy.
Yeah.
I had no idea. I mean, learn something new every day. I've only heard the Nina Simone version of Strange Fruit. I never knew that Billie Holiday was the originator of that.
Mm-hmm.
That's good to know.
There you go.
That's good to know.
Yeah, we do high and low around these parts. Folks, incidentally, right now, right this second, the link to the live show that we're doing for election night is live. And I will tell you something right now.
Don't wait.
Do not wait. This is going to be sold out by the end of the week. It may be sold out by the middle of the week. I think we've sold, our members gobbled up tickets.
Yeah.
Not a big venue, folks.
Only 350 seats there. And we will tell you, the plan for the show is vague at the moment. but what we're going to do is we're going to do coverage we've covered elections here many times, and basically what it is, you watch us drink. And as we announce when the polls are going to be closed, when we expect things, what states are important as we go along, I don't know when Pennsylvania will come in and this and that. I think I envision each of us will be taking a little bit of a break, and some of those breaks will go out, say hi to folks. It's the seated area is one thing, and then there's a anteroom, which a bar, too. So I imagine people are going to be mingling around and everything. But yes, I would say, as Steve CJ says, you're saying you guys have a concept of a plan for the MR live event. Sad. Yes, yeah. That is exactly how I would describe it. So get your tickets. It's going to be fun, or at the end of the night, it could be
horrible,
or really horrible.
So you have a chance to either see us be triumphant and in a really, really great mood, or sort of morbid in a really, really bad mood.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's ever a live event you could go to that would have this level of suspense.
Right.
Is it going to be, and look, let's not kid ourselves. Bernie Sanders is not going to be running, is not running for president. He cannot win. But with Kamala Harris, Kamala Harris, represents an opportunity more than anything else.
Yeah.
For people of our ilk, at least in terms of what policies we want, broadly speaking. I don't want to speak for everybody in the audience, but that would be, a sense of relief. It'd be fun. watch Fox News and Newsmax.
Be a relief to not be sentenced to 4 more years of Donald Trump.
Yes. Now, my guess is that if Harris is declared the winner, we'll be subjected to, 2 or 3 months of like, I can't believe they stole the election. How's that possible?
Arizona's going to take a long time, I think, because of their new rules they put in place. We're probably not going to know who won Arizona fully for a day or two.
Oh, it's true. I mean, the bottom line is going to be Pennsylvania. Once Pennsylvania comes in, then we'll have a sense of like where this is headed, it seems to me. If she loses Pennsylvania, and I don't know what time those results will come in, we should check in the past when Pennsylvania's been called. If she loses Pennsylvania, then there's going to be a long night, best case scenario. But all that said, go click on the link, get the tickets. Will we be streaming this? We are working on it. In the past, we've been able to. They have, different requirements and this, that. We're working on it, but we should have an answer for you within a week or two. So.
So, we could be celebrating, or we could say, someone in the audience bring the cyanide, and we'll all...
Oh, let's not get...
We'll go that far.
Joke!
Or we might have an ambivalent night and be like, well, I guess we're not sure. So see everybody. We'll find out on Thursday.
Hey, everybody, make sure you tune in tomorrow.
Yeah, we have a show the very next day.
We do. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Zbiotics.
Oh, yeah.
We don't have to discuss it.
Folks, your support makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajority.com. When you do, you not only get the free show free of commercials, you get the fun half, you get to IM us on the fun half, on the IM, on the app, and other things like, we opened up the ticket sales early and gave a little break to members. And don't forget justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, hot chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. Emma.
On ESPN today, we'll be talking about Week 2 in the NFL, another Burrow-Mahomes classic, some just incredible games, Raiders, Saints upsetting the teams that they played, and also, of course, the news from Thursday Night Football. Tua's apparently refusing to retire despite severe concussion issues, so we'll be talking about that, youtube.com/ESPN show.
Yeah, Left Reckoning. David and I reacted to some more of the fallout of the racist hysteria being drummed up by the GOP. And tomorrow, and check out your podcast feed. Subscribe to Left Reckoning on your podcast feed. We'll be putting some members-only show in there for the freebies this week. So check that out. Patreon.com/Left Reckoning.
Someone just reminded me that Pennsylvania can't count their early voting until the polls close.
Because of the Republican legislature.
So it's going to take forever.
I think it's the same in Arizona. I think that...
Well, Arizona's 3 hours behind us, too.
That, too, yeah. We're not going to... Yeah. I mean, with the Biden results, it's going to be a similar situation, because we went into the next day not fully, right, knowing what the results were.
Didn't we?
We did, yeah.
We had an idea, though, that Biden was going to win, I'm pretty sure.
I
don't think I went to bed it being up in the air.
I felt like we knew. But I mean,
it was called Pennsylvania was, I think, called like officially in the morning. But I as you're saying, I think there might have been an idea, just like the actual calls just didn't come in, I think, until early
and it was
November
the pandemic.
7th. Yeah, right. That too, obviously.
Tim Pool fan says, "Read my name, Sam. I'm not just someone." Pissed. They told me about that. They IM'd about the Pennsylvania will take forever to determine. But now, if I remember correctly, this is the hopeful part. We were quite aware that Hillary Clinton had lost by 11:30 at night.
Yes.
So it's not impossible that there's a scenario where, I don't know, Georgia, North Carolina, Michigan, Wisconsin come in and we're like, it's basically over, folks. I think that adds up, actually, to yes, it's over.
North Carolina has a lot of electoral votes.
Yep.
As is Georgia.
And we're going to talk about Laura. Let's just go into the fun half.
Yeah.
See you there.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ Danner.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking